We have a light at the end of the tunnel. We have 2 weeks left. So we have this module and we have next week's module, and then we will be completely finished for 6th grade. So that's something to be excited about. Now, this week we are going to continue on with a little bit from what we learned last week. We learned about percentages last week. Once again, if you go onto the module, you can download this sheet and work along with it. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. But if you can't do that, if you don't have a printer, all you need to do is have a piece of notebook paper, and whenever I'm doing work on the board, you can write it down on your notebook paper, and then if you need to watch the video again, then you have your paper with all the work and you can just go along with it, and that'll make it a little bit easier for you to understand. So today we are going to be finding a percent of a number. The way that we're going to do this is by 2 methods. The first method, we are going to use proportions. Proportions is my go-to for the method on how to do this, because proportions work no matter what you're looking for. Are you looking for the percentage? Are you looking for the part? Are you looking for the whole? This method will work no matter what you're looking for. So that's the one we're going to do first. The second method goes a little bit faster, but if you use the method on this section for what we're going to learn about next week, you get the wrong answer. But if you use proportions, it's going to work either way. So if we look at this, our first example, we are going to find 25% of 40. So the question is 25% of what of 40 is what number? So our method 1, we are going to use proportions. Now proportions, all that means is that we have 2 equal ratios. So I'm going to show you an easier example first, and then we'll get back to that example. So if I wanted to find out 1/3 equals what over 36? Now this one, I know that you can say 3 times 12 equals 36. So 1 times 12 equals 12. So we could use that method, but sometimes it's not that easy. If this number doesn't go to that number easily, it won't work. But let's use this one to prove that the method works. What you're going to do is you're going to start off by cross multiplying. All that means is I'm going to multiply the denominator of this fraction times the numerator of that fraction. 3 times x gives me 3x equals, and then I'm going to multiply the numerator of this fraction times the denominator of that fraction. When I do that, 1 times 36 equals 36. Now we have a basic equation. We have 3 times an unknown number, and so since we're multiplying by 3, to solve for x, to isolate that variable, we need to divide by 3. So if I divide this side by 3, to keep our equation balanced, I also have to divide this side by 3. 3x divided by 3 equals x. 36 divided by 3 equals 12. So just like we could have figured out that 3 times 12 equals 36, so 1 times 12 equals 12, we have proven that x equals 12. So if we go back to our proportion, when we start off with our proportion, the 2 equal ratios, you have your percent, which is always over 100, because percent means per 100. We learned that last week. Will always be equal to is which represents the part over of, which is our whole. Now, this week, we are going to be looking for the part. So our word problem this week is going to give us what the percentage is and what the whole is. So back to our original example, 25% of 40. So you can see the percent here and see how of 40. So the of belongs to the 40. So if we think P over 100 equals is over of, our percent was 25, so I'm going to fill in 25 instead of my percent. Notice, once I substitute, I'm not writing a percentage sign because that is the 25 per 100. Equals, we don't know what the is equals yet. So we're going to put an X instead of is. Then it says 25% of 40. So instead of, I'm going to substitute 40. Now I'm going to cross multiply. When I'm cross multiplying, no matter what it is, which section I'm looking for, I always start cross multiplying to include my variable because most of you are much more comfortable with the variable of an equation being on the left side. So when I do this, I'm going to start 100 times x equals 100x. 25 times 40. 25 times 40 is 1,000. So now that I've cross multiplied, now I have a basic equation. So 100x equals 1,000. If I'm going to solve for the missing part, I need to have an isolated variable. So I'm going to divide both sides by 100. 100x divided by 100 equals x. 1,000 divided by 100 equals 10. Okay, so there is our first example. So if we're going to work some problems using this proportion method. All right, so remember our percent over 100 equals is over of, which is part over whole. So for number 1, it says 60% of 150 is what number? What are we looking for? We have the percent, we have of, which is the whole. So we are looking for the part, which is x. We're going to start off by setting up our proportion correctly and then cross multiply to find your equation. And we're going to solve for x. So for this one, let me erase. I'm just going to leave this original thing up so that we always have it right in front of us. So 60% of 150. So I'm going to do 60 over 100 equals, I don't know my is, so I'm going to substitute x there. 60% of 150. So my of is going to have 150 there. So if we are cross multiplying, we need to do 100 times x, which is 100x, equals, then we need to say 60 times 150 equals 9,000. So if 100x equals 9,000, in order to solve for x, we need to divide both sides by 100, and my x is going to equal 90. So 60% of 150 is 90. Notice, is 90. And we were searching for the numerator of this fraction, the is part. So 60% of 150 is 90. 60% of 150 is 90. So we have our proportion, we set it up, and we solved. All right, our next problem is going to be 90% of 20. So if we look at this, I'm going to say 90%, so 90 over 100 of 20. So my 20 is my denominator, which means I'm looking for this numerator. So I'm going to start off by cross multiplying. 100 times x is 100x. 90 times 20 is 1,800. Now I need to solve for my missing variable. I need to divide both sides by 100, and x equals 18. Next, we're going to do number 3. Number 3 says 75% of 32. So, going through here, 75%, so 75 per 100, 75% of 32. I'm going to have 32 in my denominator and x in my numerator. So when I cross multiply, 100 times x equals 100x. When I cross multiply 75 times 32, I get 2,400. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 100 so I can isolate my x. And x equals 24. So 75% of 32 is 24. Now we're going to go to method 2. Now, as I said, the proportion method works no matter what you're looking for. This is a way you can set up if you are dealing with percentages and you're looking for any of it. If you're looking for percentages, if you're looking for the part, or if you're looking for the whole, you can use this method. And we'll do it some more next week. But if you're in a restaurant and you're trying to figure out how much tip to leave, if you're trying to figure out how much money you're going to save because of a discounted price, you're not going to want to sit there and set up a proportion. So this next method is a little bit more basic and user-friendly when you're wanting to use it in real life. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to that 25% of 40, which was what our original, 25% of 40, yes. Okay, which was what our original example was. Now I'm going to do it in a way that's a little bit more user-friendly. A way that you can use it if you were looking at a pair of jeans that were on sale and they said you got a sale of 25% and the original price is $40 and you're trying to figure out, well, how much does that mean I'm going to pay? So you can think, 25%. Last week, we learned that to change a percent into a decimal, all you need to do is divide by 100. So if I have 25%, that's going to be my decimal, 0.25. So that's what I would type into my calculator. Instead of 25%, I would type in 0.25. Now in math, when we see the word of, the operation that we should think about is multiplication. So if we're doing 25% of 40, I'm going to do 0.25 because that's the same thing as 25% times 40. And if I type that into my calculator, I get the number 10. And if you remember, when we did proportions, we did 25 over 100 equals x over 40. When we cross multiplied, we said 100x equals 25 times 40 is 1,000. Then we divided both sides by 100, and x was equal to 10. So it doesn't matter which method I use as long as I'm using it correctly. So if we have 25% of 40, you can change that percent into a decimal and then use that decimal in your calculator to multiply times the original. So 25% of 40 is 10. So that means if you were looking at a pair of jeans that were $40 and there's a sale that's 25% off, that means you're going to save $10 on that pair of jeans and you'll only have to pay $30. All right, so let's use this method to work the last few problems. So for number 4 on your worksheet, there it is. We have 30% of 50. So my first step, I need to change this percent into a decimal. So 30% is the same thing as the decimal 0.3, because on your calculator, if you say 30 divided by 100, you get 0.3. So I'm going to write my decimal, instead of, I'm going to say times 50 equals 15. So 30% of 50 is 15. Okay, the next one is 8% of 48. So if I say 8% of 48, I'm going to start off by changing my percent into a decimal. When you have a percent that is less than 10, you have to be very careful, because one common mistake is you see 8% and you say, 0.8. But if you type it in your calculator and you say 8 divided by 100, 8% is actually the decimal 0.08. So make sure that if your percent only has a single digit, make sure you still have those 2 decimal places when you're changing it to a decimal. So 8%, which is 8/100ths, of is times 48. And if you say 0.08 times 48 on your calculator, it will give you the answer 3.84. So that is my answer. 8% of 48 is 3 84/100ths. And my next one. On this one, they're giving me a percentage that's greater than 100. So they give me 150% of 66. Once again, first step, change my percent into a decimal. 150% is the same thing as 1.5 because 150 divided by 100 equals 1 5/10. So I need to put that decimal 1 5/10 times 66. And when you put that into your calculator, you get the answer 99. So 150% of 66 is 99. All right, the next section that we're going to do 5 more problems. And those 5 problems are going to be real life situations. So for this first one, if I want to leave a 20% tip for a $30 meal, in essence, I need to figure out what 20% of 30 is. So for these, you can use either method. For 1 or 2, I might do both methods. So if I go back to that proportion method, 20%, remember I want the percent over 100 equals is over of. So of 30, my is, I'm going to put x. So if I cross multiply, 100 times x is 100x. 20 times 30 equals 600. Divide both sides by 100. And x equals 6. If we use method 2, 20% is equal to this decimal 2/10, 0.2. So if I take that decimal and I multiply times 30, 0.2 times 30 equals 6. So my answer for a 20% tip for a $30 meal, what I would tip is $6. I would leave a $6 tip. So make sure that when you're answering word problems, you remember if you're talking about dollars, you need to have your answer have a dollar sign with it. All right, number 8. Okay, now we have a 7% sales tax on a $20 shirt. Now let's just use method 2. So 7% of 20. So 7%, 7 divided by 100 is 0.07. So I'm going to use that decimal, multiply times 20, and I get 1.4. I don't know about you, but if I want 7% sales tax on $20 shirt, I hope they don't tell me 1.4. They're going to tell me $1.40. So it's going to be $1.40 is going to be my sales tax. Okay, last 3 problems for this week. All right, 6% service charge for a $200 concert ticket. So that means I want to find 6% of $200. So using method 2, our real life method, the one that's going to work if you're out in the real world and you just have your phone calculator to find out a number real quick. 6% is going to be 0.06. So 6% of 200, I'm going to do 0.06 times 200, and that gives me the answer 12. So my final answer is going to be $12. There will be a $12 service charge on that concert ticket. Okay. 30% discount on a pair of $119 sneakers. So I want to find out what 30% of $119 is. 30% is the same thing as 0.3. So 3/10 times 119 gives me $35.70. So if you had a 30% discount on a pair of $119 shoes, that means you would save $35.70 because of that discount. And then the last one, a 25% discount on a $75 pair of jeans. So 25% of $75, 25% is the same thing as 0.25. So when I do 0.25 times 75, I get 18.75. That means I am going to save $18.75. All right, so this week and next week, we will be working with Big Ideas, exercise 5.6. There are 2 sections of it, and so instead of putting all of it together, we're just doing the one section. So in this week, you are only going to be looking for the part in our proportion. So you would do 30% of 50, so you're looking for your is if you do the proportion. We have not specified that you have to do the proportion. If this method works for you, do this. You can do this for all of your problems this week, and that will be perfectly fine. Y'all, I hope you are doing so well. I have missed you so much this last term. I feel like I have been robbed because I lost 25% of my year. I lost the last quarter, and that means I've lost 1 out of 4 terms. I have missed 25% of my year with you. So next year, when I see you in the hallway, you better say hi because you have 9 weeks to make up for. So I hope you are having a great week, and if you have any questions, you can come to the Wednesday conference. For my regular classes, it's going to be at 10 o'clock, only from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So if you have questions, you need to come then. And for my accelerated, if you have questions about this, you can come from 11 to 12. And I will see you then. And I hope you have a great week. Bye.